Talk about a powerful voice in the paranormal community. Today I am honored to have the one and only radio host Clyde Lewis joining us to talk about his upcoming lecture and workshop at Contact in the Desert. He's not only been on the airwaves since the early 80s in creating his radio show, Ground Zero. We're going to be talking about not only his journey that began his career of bringing us information of the latest paranormal news, but we're going to be talking about the new Space Force. Why do we need an interplanetary security and defense of planet Earth from near-Earth objects? Is this a forewarning? Is there something that he knows that we don't? Or is this alien threats that is sure to happen in our near future? I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios, the one and only legendary Clyde Lewis.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is awesome. Amazing to have you here.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, this is exciting for me because, I've been doing this for about 8 years with this particular show and my own podcasts for 14 years. But when I see people like yourself that have been doing this for a long time, it's always an honor because we always look up to people like you because that's who we base our shows off of. So thank you first of all, for doing what you've done for all these years.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's been a long while. A lot of people come and go. There's a lot of inspiration that comes from others that have been here before me. And that's why I'm here, is because of their inspiration, the inspiration that's carried something like Contact in the Desert for as long as it's been carrying it.
Well, when I was a kid, and I've told the story many times on my show, and I'm sure on your show you've told your own stories, but it's always important to share each other's stories when it comes to paranormal activity such as ghosts, UFO encounters, abductions. I've never necessarily been abducted, but we did see a UFO me and my family. And that's always stuck with my family. We watch all the shows and the sci-fi, and it's always given us something to talk about, around the table. But what was your story? What was your inspiration? Was it just a radio show, or was it actual encounter that, took you to that, oh my God, I have to know more?
I guess I don't know where to start. When I was a little boy, I remember back in the old days, I don't think many people know. I mean, I hate saying old days because it just dates me. But back in I believe it was in the 60s, early 70s, sirens on fire engines and police cars and ambulances all sounded the same. They didn't have the whoop whoop sound.
Right.
Now they have the whoop whoop sound. I remember my father telling me this story, and it really made me think about exactly what was going on in my life. But I had to have been maybe about 4 years old, and the whoop whoop sirens were heard near my home for the first time. My father told me that when I heard the whoop whoop sirens, I ran in, I hid under the bed, and I said, the aliens are landing. And my father thought, well, where does he get this from? Because we don't talk about aliens in the house, or,
right.
He hasn't really watched any TV shows where aliens would be on. I mean, aliens weren't really that big of a thing in the 70s. They were in the 50s and the 60s, but not the 70s. And so my father was always concerned, why did I have this fear of maybe aliens or, other things. And when I was a kid too, I used to always think to myself that if I just was able to tuck in my covers, the demons wouldn't come in and get me in the middle of the night. And so I had all these fears when I was a kid of all this. But it wasn't until I was in my teen years that we moved to another area, and there was a barber shop that my father used to go to. It was Blackie's Barber Shop. It was in Kearns, Utah. And Blackie and his buddies would always, Blackie was the barber, and his buddies would always get together. They cut hair, but a bunch of men would all be sitting around talking about conspiracy theories, talking about aliens, talking about Bigfoot, talking about everything. And my father would tell us stories, and he was one of these guys that believed in conspiracy theories. And And the guys believed in conspiracy theories. And there I was sitting in a barbershop where they had jackalopes in the barbershop and deer heads and everything.
Right.
Talking about all these strange stories of Bigfoot and UFOs and conspiracy theories. And that was something that in my life I thought was interesting. Plus, I loved comic books and horror films, sci-fi horror films. I was a big collector of those. And I even wrote my own fanzine at one time about horror movies and the like. Met Forrest J. Ackerman, which is very impressive. The guy that did Famous Monsters of Filmland, and even penned my own vampire movie. And it was what I was doing because it was, I guess, in my DNA. And I worked with, when I was 14, I first got my gig in radio. I was actually running gospel tapes.
At 14?
Yeah, at 14, I was basically working at an AM station, spinning gospel tapes. It was a gospel station called KBBX, Utah's Golden Gospel Giant. I remember spinning these college tapes of Christian preachers and all this. There was a guy by the name of Wolfgang Gossett and another guy by the name of Steve Stay. And Steve Stay used to do this thing like eBay on the radio. It was called Tradio. And what I would do is I would work in the background, and it was kind of becoming a producer for him. But he also had this association with a guy named Wolfgang Gossett. Wolfgang Gossett was this Antioch priest who did a show about the paranormal. And it was interesting to talk with him because he considered himself a psychic and he considered himself this, but he had this really, really, really dark background, and no one really knew anything about him, only he was this Antioch priest. And I remember I went to broadcasting school, and I did a video. We did some video about what our interests were. My interests were in the paranormal and ghosts and things. And so I went to interview him, and I wanted to interview his associates. And one of his associates told me, don't ask any questions about Wolfgang Gossett because he has a very dark past. And I was thinking, what is it about this guy? What is it about Wolfgang that's so bizarre? Well, I ended up in 1995 doing Ground Zero, and it was just basically off to me. I was doing talk radio and news radio. I worked for a CNN affiliate. We learned CNN stuff. I was more or less a news jock. I wrote for morning shows, a lot of comedy. I was a comedy writer, and I was a number of other things. I've had so many hats, and I was an actor. And what was funny was that after I believe it was my first cancer surgery, because I've had cancer. I've been battling kidney cancer now for a while, and it's now gone because they've gotten most of it out of me, hopefully. I was in a market that I frequented up here in Portland, and I was drinking coffee, and this guy, who was a doctor, he was a really nice doctor that I knew and used to hang out with, told me, he says, I've been listening to Coast to Coast AM. And he said there was a guy that came on, his name was Galen Cook. And Galen Cook says that he has evidence that there's this man that is D.B. Cooper. And I never really thought of D.B. Cooper, really. Never thought of him. I moved to the Northwest and everything, Bigfoot, D.B. Cooper, UFOs, everything was kind of cool. I says, oh, really? Well, I think it's interesting, but I don't really pay attention to the D.B. Cooper case. I don't know why. He said to me, he says, well, you need to look at these pictures and tell me what you think. And so he showed me this picture, and I looked right at it, and I says, oh, my God. I said, this is a guy that I know. He goes, well, who is he? He says, it's Wolfgang Gossett. This guy's Wolfgang Gossett. It's a guy that I worked with in Salt Lake City. He did a paranormal show. It was a priest.
Oh, my God.
And I immediately got on the phone trying to get a hold of this lawyer. And I called Steve, and Steve, my old partner a long time ago, I said, you'd never guess who they think is D.B. Cooper. And Steve goes, Wolfgang Gossett. I go, what? He goes, yeah, it's been rumored for the longest time. He didn't even admit it, but a lot of people he was investigated as being D.B. Cooper. And I said, why didn't you tell me when I was growing up? So there was actually a comic book that was released called Brujeria. It was written by a guy named Aaron Duran. And I was reading this comic book. And in the comic book, there's this werewolf who's got, out of control hair and a beard and wears dark glasses. And I called the guy and I said, hey, can I ask you a question? And he says, yeah. I says, who did you base this character, the wolf character on? He says, I based it on you. I says, and you know what's interesting? I said, this guy is supposed to be like this kind of Wolfman, kind of Man in Black type character. And it says that he was trained by D.B. Cooper. I said, did you know that I may have known D.B. Cooper? And he said, oh, no, I didn't. I said, well, that's kind of an interesting coincidence because, so I have, you know, a lot of mysteries in my life that I have to try and uncover as to whether or not I was good friends with D.B. Cooper, whether my mentor was none other than D.B. Cooper, and that my heritage goes back to the 1973 hijacking of a plane, Northwest Airlines over the Northwest. So here I am in the Northwest. It was funny because I found out that his widow lived like maybe 3 or 4 doors down from me.
Oh my gosh.
And I moved to an area where they believed that, I mean, not Ariel, but another area called St. John's, where they believed that he fell or he at least came down. So there's been a lot of things, both conspiratorial, paranormal.
Around you.
I mean, I actually visited the Skinwalker Ranch before it was a Skinwalker Ranch. I used
really?
to go out to Uinta Basin. Oh, yeah.
That's right in your area.
Yeah, Uinta Basin. When I lived in Salt Lake, you just go out to Vernal, Utah, the Uinta Basin, and UFOs there all the time. It's where the dinosaur quarries are. And Skinwalker Ranch, I was out there before anyone even cared about it. And I was exploring out there, and we were hearing all kinds of crazy stuff out in that area. I worked with Alien Dave Rosenfeld, and I worked with Kevin DeLulo, who was a movie producer that I knew, and we used to hang out there and get all kinds of crazy stuff. And so yeah, it was a hobby that turned into something serious. And what's interesting is that while I was hobbying around and acting all smart alecky because I was young and I didn't know any better, the thing that really changed my mind about all this, believe it or not, was the death of Princess Diana.
Really? How's that?
I was on a plane coming back from Las Vegas, and I had just lost a lot of money. Let's just say I lost a lot of money in Vegas, and I went and got myself the loser lunch, which is a hot dog and some nachos for 99 cents.
You asked for change back.
Yeah, I ate them forlornly in this little casino called Wagons Ho. And I got my cab, went out to the airport, got in the plane, and getting on the plane, it was hot, and I was feeling gross because the hot dog and the chips just didn't sit well. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of like nodding off in the plane because it's so hot. Here we are flying over the desert. The plane is just shaking. It's just shaking back and forth, up and down. I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to die. I've never had turbulence this bad. Captain gets on the intercom and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, I have some very, very, very sad news. And I thought, oh my God, the plane's going to crash, right? And he said, sad news, Princess Diana died tonight in France. She was killed in an automobile accident. I was sitting next to this guy, and this guy looks over at me and he says, they finally did it. I go, what do you mean? He says, they killed Princess Diana. And on my flight home, he told me the whole story about why he felt that Princess Diana was murdered and why it was all a conspiracy. Mm-hmm. Immediately, he didn't know who I was, and he didn't know I was just young. I was doing a radio show. It didn't matter, but I did the radio show on Princess Diana. I was completely intrigued by it, and I had to go back. I decided I was going to be a little bit more serious about this, and so I realized that these were news stories that needed to be covered that no one else would cover. And with my news acumen in my background, I wanted to be a journalist that would entertain people. So Ground Zero, when it first came on in 1995, it was basically there to expose the lies my dad told me. Mm-hmm. It had nothing to do with reality of what's going on. It had nothing to do with the reality. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't a fool. So I would investigate things so I wasn't foolish. I mean, playing records backwards to see if Paul McCartney was dead. I did it all.
Done that.
And it was just how I began. And so eventually I got real serious about it. And my radio station where I worked, KCNR, we were one of the first radio stations to go live on the internet with the show. So my show was the first internet broadcast paranormal show. It would be because we did this. And then we brought Art Bell on for the ride, and we brought on Jeff Rentz for the ride on sightings because we aired those shows. And there was another show called Paranet Continuum. So Saturdays and Sundays were jam-packed with paranormal shows on the station KCNR. And when Art Bell found out, he was broadcasting, live, he was really excited. And so we had this exchange, and we basically started at the same time. So I was young and I wasn't knowing where I fit into this mold. And people used to always ask me, you're copying Art Bell? I said, no, I'm not. I'm doing my own thing. And I used to get all frustrated. Now people say, I remind them of Art Bell, and I kind of say, well, that's nice. I said, I'm a very good Clyde Lewis, and I enjoy the compliment. Now, before I was like, I don't want anybody to think I'm ripping off Art Bell, because I wasn't.
Right.
I mean, my show is a lot different. It's about the paranormal, but I'm a production news guy, so I like to create produced bits,
Right.
where
Right.
you're listening and it takes you into this theater of the mind, because my parents raised me on an old radio, the Columbia Broadcast Network. I remember Zero Hour with Rod Serling, The Shadow with Orson Welles.
Right.
And so I have that in my background, plus, listening to a lot of Pink Floyd records and hearing the experimental sounds of Pink Floyd would put that all together, and you've got Ground Zero. So, Ground Zero is a little bit comic book, a little bit scary, a little bit B-movie, horror film, and a lot of production that hopefully sends your mind into a different realm. That's the whole point.
Let me ask you this, because Coast to Coast, and then especially Ancient Aliens really kind of brought the ufology community to the mainstream. Before that, I mean, there was a lot of people interested in it, but how was the audience, and how was the reaction of your type of show, paranormal show, Coast to Coast, back 80s, 90s, before it went mainstream? How was the audience reaction back then? Was it smaller? I mean, I would definitely probably smaller, or was it a lot of people listening in, kind of the hiding at home under their pillows, listening and not telling people?
I would say it was a cult following back then. In fact, I was going to call Ground Zero Cult Radio. I didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was the original name, was Cult Radio. And the reason why was because I felt there's a cult following for this type of stuff. There's a cult following for UFOs, there's a cult following with B-movies and comic books.
Right.
It's all rolled up into one big, sci-fi burrito that everybody, wants to hear a good story. And I used to say to myself, I tell bedtime stories for grown-ups. That's what I do at night. I haven't trademarked that, although I should. But
you should.
It's the idea that, I'm telling bedtime stories for grown-ups. And every once in a while, I talk about what I call parapolitical talk. And people say, why don't you just call it political? Well, I don't, because parapolitical to me is examining ponerism in politics, meaning politics are supposed to work well for the people, but when they don't, they're evil and they're ugly. And being evil and ugly is something that they're really good at. They're sadists. And that's why conspiracy theories exist. Right. Now conspiracy theories are a dime a dozen because of Alex Jones. Alex Jones has blazed the way for conspiracy theory. But the trouble is that it used to be a little of this and a little of that and a little of this. Art Bell did it. I'm doing that.
Right.
Alex Jones is a purveyor of conspiracy theory. I'm a purveyor of hopefully good stories, which have facts behind them.
Right.
I also really loved urban legends, and I did a whole show about urban legends because Jan Harold Brunvant used to be a colleague or a friend of mine, where I used to ask him about southern fried rat stories, or stories about getting your kidney taken away from you and thrown into a bathtub.
Right.
I mean, these were stories that I really enjoyed as well, so I focused on them, and dealing with a lot of comic book artists and other actors and people that I associated with in the business. It just gave me an opportunity to have an edge. And there are a lot of things that I did in the background that not very many people know that I've done, that I've been involved with, that projects that are part of the pop culture now that I really didn't take credit for, because it was just something that I was doing to try and see if I could push the envelope. I mean, there's some urban legends that I've created that are out there in the zeitgeist that, I smile whenever I hear somebody repeat them, because I know where they began.
Right.
And, other synchronous events I used to take part in too. Like, I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'm the guy who actually synchronized Dark Side of the Moon to The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That old legend where you could take the Dark Side of the Moon of Pink Floyd and play it with The Wizard of Oz. I was the guy that originated that. And Alan Parsons knows it. I know it. And, in the 90s in Utah, I'd been doing it for months. And then I ended up on the Jeff Katz show in Boston. And he asked me about it. And I told him about it. And then all of a sudden, two DJs in Boston who were in the Boston Herald saying that they started it. And they didn't. I had a friend of mine who, there was a guy named Gary, his name was Barry Mall, and then there was Mike Beck, and then there was Kevin DeLulo, and we all were in on this joke where we were basically synchronizing stuff to videos to music. And it just so happened we luckily expanded on the possibility you could do that with the Pink Floyd album, and that's how it was done.
Right.
There's other things too. Like there's an urban legend that went around that Cabbage Patch dolls were actually the reason why Cabbage Patch dolls existed was because they wanted to groom young girls into raising mutated babies, because in the future we'd have a nuclear war and these mutated babies would show up. So they were grooming girls for that. We came up with that urban legend. A guy by the name of Richard Rounds and I came up with that urban legend, and so it's pretty funny. We also know the artist that if you remember the Little Mermaid
right.
poster that has, they call it the phallus in the palace. And Bill Morrison, who we knew, who did the comic book Roswell, the Little Green Man,
right,
is actually the guy that made that.
Really?
He didn't do it on purpose. He did it by accident. So, I mean, there are a lot of people that I know, and a lot of people that I am aware, and a lot of things that I was involved with in the background that have been part of pop culture, and we just never took credit for it. We never said, "Oh, look at us! This is what we did." We just did it to see what would happen, see if it'd catch on. And so it has. And anymore, I mean, it's not talked about all the time, but back in the 90s and in the early 2000s, there were a lot of crazy things going on that we had a hand in. Art Bell had a hand in a lot of crazy stuff too.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that because some of the things that he did, I don't want to give away his secrets, but some of the things that he did, we were aware that he was creating a lot of legends as well.
Let me ask you, I mean, because, I mean, that's not uncommon. I mean, hell, I remember my grandpa and my dad and his brothers would, you know, they told stories, you know, and every time they told a story, it got bigger and bigger. The 2-pound bass was eventually 15-pound, and it took them an hour to reel it in. So, I mean, that's just, I think, part of the human culture and in enhancing. But what is your take on the people like Alex Jones and the people that really take it to a level where it's I'm just going to say almost dangerous, to where, because I love to enhance things too. And because, you know, as radio host and TV host or whatever, you're still an entertainer. And so you have to entertain people.
Yeah. I think the problem we have today is that, I mean, Alex Jones, I've known him, talked with him for many years. I knew him
right.
when he was just a guy who was doing his public access TV show in Texas.
Right.
And I haven't talked to him for a while now. I mean, last time I talked to him was like, I think 2 years ago. But the thing with Alex is, and the problem I have is with a lot of the media today, is they don't want to leave us alone.
No.
They want to continually exploit us.
Right.
And make us out to look like we're crazy. We know the joke. We're in on the joke.
Right.
Okay. We're in on the joke. I always tell people I could be kidding, but I'm very serious about what I kid about. And that's the way I feel about Alex. That's the way I feel about Art. That's the way I feel about George. I mean, you know, we're not saying that everything we're talking about is God's honest truth.
Right.
I mean, that's what everybody interprets. Everybody interprets that, you know, you must be saying it. You must believe it if you're saying it. Not necessarily. I mean, there was a time when people reported things. They did research on things, and they found them interesting. They didn't know if they believed them or not, but they wanted to look into them. Right. And they thought they were fascinating stories. But see, this is where the media doesn't get the joke. This is where the media doesn't understand irony. This is where the media doesn't understand satire, investigation, or anything like that. I mean, if Woodward and Bernstein were investigating Nixon in the year 2021, they'd be conspiracy theorists.
Right.
And that's the thing. Now they're critical of conspiracy theory. But they went on a hunch that Nixon, you know, and it's like, it's funny how times change, is that speculations and theories are a part of what America is. I mean, America was built on a conspiracy theory. These guys conspired against a king.
That's true.
So the biggest conspiracy of all time is the United States of America.
And we love that.
We do. Yeah, and we love it. And it's going to be conspiracies that are going to bring us back to where we need to be, I think. I mean, if you're conspiring for something good, then what's the harm? You just got to make sure that you do it the right way.
And I think, you know, some conspiracy theories have brought attention to something that really was happening, and it helped, better society, and it's helped correct or keep people that needs to be off the streets or out of politics or whatever you want. It does benefit sometimes in the long run. So
I mean, anymore, give a conspiracy theorist 6 months and he's going to be right.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, I don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist either. A lot of the things I talk about, I have to do the research for. I mean, my job is a lot harder as a talk show host
Right.
than, let's say, a Sean Hannity or
Right.
someone else who can basically go the party line. I don't talk party line.
Right.
I have to talk about, the mysterious nature of it all, the synchronistic nature of it all, dates, numbers, signs, wonders, ghosts, demons, how demons play into it, how religion plays into it, the supernatural aspects of the blueprint we call the eschaton. I mean, these are things that really highbrow, but a lot of people, they understand it more than we give them credit for. And I think that, listeners to shows like mine and George and maybe Jimmy Church and those, they're very intellectual, highly intellectual people. There are a lot of people that believe almost anything, but there are a lot of intellectuals too who understand what is going on here. And they like to have their mind expanded in directions that aren't going to be harmful.
And that's why I do look up to you and Jimmy and George and Art Bell, because they brought intellectual to the conversation and not just throwing things out there to see what stick. So that's one reason I think many of us tune in to people like yourself for that particular reason. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. We got to promote Contact in the Desert. I can't believe it's only a week away, and it's a virtual event this year. But you and many other amazing people are going to be speakers there. And so everybody get your tickets today at contactinthedesert.com. And we're going to come back. We'll talk about his Clyde Lewis's lecture and workshop. And then we'll get into some of the details of what's currently in the news and some of the releases of the U.S. government agencies about UFOs. So be right back. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told.
When you start to ask the question, it unfolds the fabric of space itself, how it's made. What is it made of?
We're not alone in this universe. We never have been.
Alien intelligences have cohabited with us on this planet for millions of years.
We inherited the obsession from the Anunnaki. Anyone that still thinks that we're the ones that are obsessed with gold does not know enough about the true history of our species, how we came to be here, and the conditions that brought us here.
We are not unique in this universe. Extraterrestrials do exist. We are, so to say, the copies of them.
All right, we are back with the legendary radio host, the one and only Clyde Lewis, and we are going to be talking about his workshop and lecture coming up at Contact in the Desert. Could you tell us about your workshop and your lecture coming up?
Well, I'm gonna be talking about Bracewell Probes, and I'm thinking that not very many people know about Bracewell Probes. Back in 1960, there was a Stanford radiophysicist named Ronald Bracewell, and he was talking about supergalactic communities. And his theory was that that these communities out there, if we were able to find them, would find a way to do recon on planet Earth before they were to come here. And the way they would do it is they would disperse autonomous interstellar probes. It's kind of a hypothetical way to reach out. And so what they do is they would camouflage them as interstellar objects or camouflage them as rocks or asteroids.
Right.
And the reason why I wanted to talk about Bracewell Probes is because we've had an increase of close shaves cosmically with these NEOs, these near Earth objects. And another inspiration was after I talked with Avi Loeb about Oumuamua, and he was talking about how he felt that Oumuamua was kind of like a junk car that was released in interstellar space, or it could have been a sail or some other artifact. And I said, well, what's the possibility it could be a Bracewell probe? And he says it could be. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it didn't send a signal or anything, but there were other Bracewell probes as well, like the Black Knight. I don't know if you ever
I don't
remember the story about the Black Knight.
I
It was
do not.
like 1954. It was prior to, I think Sputnik was 1957, but in 1954 it was reported there were 2 satellites that were out there that science was baffled about. It was in Popular Mechanics where they first published the story. And back then, those who were in charge of space and the Army Air Force, well, Army Air Force, they were the Air Force, but the Air Force was very angry that this story got out because they had no idea what this was. And so what they did is they did some investigating, and someone had said that there was a satellite that was up there that was thousands of years old. There was an alien artifact, and it been going in and out of orbit for thousands of years. So they called it the Black Knight, and the Black Knight was a Bracewell Sentinel probe as well, mainly because the idea was that they were watching us, that these probes are watching us. And if you go back to like just before COVID, I remember I was reporting scores of stories that talked about near Earth objects passing through the solar system, nearly missing Earth. In fact, in November of, I believe, 2018, there were these near Earth objects that were so close that they could have triggered what is called a Yarkovsky effect. And what a Yarkovsky effect is where something gets so close to the Earth, it becomes a moon. And I believe we have an artificial moon already out there that they don't talk about, but it's been around for it's been around for months that we have an artificial moon out there that's actually going around the planet. And that could very well be a Bracewell probe as well. So, talking with Avi Loeb, I talked with Richard Hoagland about this. I've talked with other people. And they say that Bracewell probes could be a reality, and they could be used to observe the Earth. And if they're successful, they would, they could easily, use the Yarkovsky effect to actually, watch us and make sure that we're okay. And that's the thing, is that and I think that's another reason why they wanted to send probes to other asteroids. I mean, they've been wanting to send probes to asteroids. They've been wanting to, rather than landing something on the moon, they want to land them on an asteroid. And I think it's because they have a curiosity about whether or not there are technosignatures in asteroids and near Earth objects. So if they're looking for technosignatures in something like maybe Oumuamua or Borisov,
right,
or any other interstellar object, then that would indicate that a Bracewell Sentinel is out there, that it's sending a signal to activate other probes or signal an extraterrestrial intelligence to our presence. And if that's the case, I mean, we could easily have something hiding, or some sort of civilization, or even an armada of UFOs or saucers or spaceships or whatever. They could be hanging out in the Jovian system near Jupiter and Saturn. And we'd be able to detect them until they got here. So when people say, oh, they wouldn't come thousands of light years from space to find us and just to do this or do that, they may not even be thousands of light years away. They could be sitting in the Jovian system where it's hard to find things. I mean, they're still discovering moons in the Jovian system. So, I mean, and we're having these fast radio bursts that are coming out. It just makes you wonder, that when you're looking at something like the Breakthrough Listen Initiative and what they're listening for, or what NASA said now, that they're focusing on biosignatures. They're focusing on fossilized life on Mars. Well, there are others like Avi Loeb. There are others like the guys at SETI that are looking for technosignatures. They're not looking for life. They're looking at proof of what would be considered technologies that are advanced. In fact, I remember after the Oumuamua situation happened, that's when President Trump got activated for Space Force.
Mm-hmm.
There needed to be something to be put together just in case we have to figure out what to do. And Space Force entails a lot of things. Space Force entails not only, outer space, but also cyberspace. And it also focuses on particle accelerators and all this science fiction stuff that we attribute to Star Trek. And it's all put out there because there are belief systems that have changed about not only how the aliens are trying to communicate with us, but how they are watching us. And I remember a story that came out after Bracewell probes were first discussed again. I mean, it was back in the 1960s where they first talked about Bracewell probes because of the scientists that came up with the idea. But after Oumuamua was seen, and after Stephen Hawking got all excited about it, and then he eventually died, but after he got all excited about it, and a number of other people got all excited about it, the folks that said he were saying, well, what are we dealing with here? And there was another scientist that said, well, I know what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with synthetic intelligence that could be thousands of years old, maybe millennia, that exist, and that's what these alien grays are. That they're not biological creatures at all, but they're synthetic AI.
Yeah.
And they're being used by some greater intelligence that sends them out here to visit us every once in a while. So, I mean, even though the fast radio bursts are yet to be proven to be anything that we can connect to aliens, the itinerary for the 21st century is to find evidence for technosignatures, biosignatures, and perhaps alien artifacts from space. And so, I mean, Bracewell had already outlined how signals would be found and detected by calculating variations in echo delay times of radio transmissions and LDEs, which are long delayed echoes. And he said that if these orbital objects are out there, then we would be a prime candidate for being watched. The extraterrestrials would be sending those rocks out there as camouflage. They'd be camouflaged. There's a guy, I believe, named James Benford, who actually pushes the Bracewell probe idea. And he suggested that alien satellites would be disguised as near-Earth objects, and they'd be monitoring our planet. And that's why we always have something coming by, is because they're becoming more aggressive with their watching of the planet.
Right.
So not only are we seeing these strange craft that are buzzing by our military, but we're also seeing, or we're having scientists express that interstellar objects could be artifacts from other planets or artifacts from other civilizations. And then, of course, there's the possibility that some of these are carrying probes to watch us. And it's a good way to disguise them in space. They're called lurkers. If you have lurkers, it'd be amazing if we found a lurker and we say, oh, we got a probe here. But it would be also terrifying if we landed something on an asteroid
Right.
and the probe saw that we were there, and immediately they'd radio back saying, oh, they're coming, they're aggressive, and then we'd have an interstellar invasion on our hands. But see, at the moment here, it's fascinating to think that they may have used this type of recon that's a natural recon to hide their technologies.
Do you feel like, because I remember the stranger at the Pentagon, and they were talking about, Thor was like, hey, we have every answer to your illnesses and planet and everything that you need to fix your home, but all the government was worried about was the technology. Do you feel the technology is, more towards other nations, or do you really feel that we're trying to build our technology because of what is out there beyond the stars?
Well, we're building our technology to reach out, I think. I think we need to improve on our technologies that go back to the 1950s, 1957,
Right.
58, Werner von Braun, the real rockets, the V2 rockets, and eventually Saturn V and the moon
Right.
rockets, which for some reason we don't have information on what has happened to them or what is going on with them. And so that's the problem, is that we don't have that. And so I think we need to advance our rockets and advance our rocketry because of it, or advance our space capabilities because of it.
I mean, we've heard this many times. It's like, they've been here observing us, and even ancient civilizations, they presented themselves to, Egypt and other civilizations. But why did they decide to stop? I guess they're not stopping with abductions and stuff, but I mean, with civilizations like the everyday people and the governments, and they're not present all the time, because like I said, there's hieroglyphs showing that they were among our humanity before. So why are they?
You teach and you leave. You teach and you learn. You teach a civilization,
right.
You see how long that goes, and you come down and teach them again. I mean, the aliens aren't in the process of Deus Ex Machinas. They don't believe in that. They don't believe that, everything is a Deus Ex Machina. I mean, that's exactly what everybody's waiting for. They're waiting for the moment. And that's why whenever I hear UFO people saying, oh, they just intervene and give us the secrets of the universe, the secrets of, unlimited energy, and they're not going to do that. They're just not going to do that. They're going to have you learn it on your own. They're going to give you the hints. They're going to give you the, they give you little pieces to put together, but they want to be teachers. They are teachers. They're not givers. They're not going to give you all the knowledge at once. It's just too much to take in. I mean, to know the secrets of the universe is not going to be bam. You just know the secrets of the universe. It's like, we're coming down and we're going to teach you basics.
Right.
We teach you the basics, and then we're going to come down and we're going to teach you more. And then there are other things you're going to learn too. It's like, what was the most simplistic way of delivering information in a science fiction movie like 2001: A Space Odyssey? It was nothing but a slab that stood there in the midst of nothing. The monkeys came, touched it, and immediately they got intelligence to do the things that they did. And we awaited the time where another monolith would come and we'd learn even more. And this is happening all the time. Soon our monolith will return, whatever it is. It's gonna come back. It's like what Arthur C. Clarke calls the big dumb moment, or the big dumb thing, where mankind realizes that he's not as smart as he thinks he is, and that we have to somehow make our peace with a big dumb thing, a big dumb object, or a big revelation or epiphany that's given to us from on high. Philip K. Dick talked about it as well when he talked about Valis. And maybe we're waiting for our Valis. We're waiting for it's not going to be over the top. It's going to be everything that's done, I'm finding on this planet, is done with subtlety. And I just don't believe that an alien invasion is going to be over the top. I believe it's going to be subtle.
Yeah.
And I believe that the knowledge is going to be given to certain individuals, and those individuals are going to be prophets. That's how it works. I mean, you look at how it's done in the Bible. God just didn't come down and say, hey, I'm here, guys. What do you think? No.
Right.
God chose people like Moses and chose people like Noah and others to say, hey, guys, I got the goods. And you either choose to believe it or not believe it. I always had this idea of doing a movie where Jesus Christ returns, and the way he tells everybody he's here is he hires, one of those phone solicitors. Hey, Jesus is back. Click.
Right.
And that's how it's done. Is that it's never done where it's obvious. It's done where you're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to figure it out. So I mean, if everybody's thinking the aliens are going to be here to save us, I don't think they're here to save us. I've always joked they're here to eat us, only because of the fact they're going to eat the stupid, and they're going to teach the ones that are smart, that are able to learn.
Right. Oh God, I'm in trouble.
If you can't learn anything, you're just cattle anyway, right? So you're just grist for the mill.
I said, oh God, I'm in trouble.
I would suggest we learn and pay attention, and not get into this, over the top. They're my spiritual guides. No, they're teachers. They're brilliant, they're advanced, but they're not just going to throw it at you and say, here you go. Right. You're going to learn little by little, bit by bit.
This kind of reminds me of a parent. They're not going to give the car keys and a beer to a 14-year-old.
No.
So,
and the aliens aren't going to do it with us either.
Right,
sure.
Right. Well, before we get out of here, we only have about 5 minutes left. I like to ask my co-host in the chat room and see if they had questions. So, if you don't mind if I throw you just a couple questions, and then we'll get you out of here.
Okay.
All right. So we have, okay, well, this is a good one. Smile a While. That's the name. Clyde, whose presentation, other than your own, of course, at Contact, are you looking forward to seeing? Who are some of the people that you're looking forward to hearing some new information?
Caroline Corey.
Oh, she's great.
Just Caroline Corey. I was familiarized with Caroline Corey back when I attended another conference in Las Vegas. And Brad Olson and I were together. And it's when we first met Brad and I. We hit it off really well. We're really good friends. And Brad and I went to one of her presentations, and we were dead tired because we'd been up the night before, didn't get really much sleep. And we were just so blown away by what Caroline Corey had to say that I'm looking forward to seeing her presentation, because she's always busy, always working, and she's always thorough, and she's got some of the best presentations out there. So yes, my Caroline Corey would be my bet for the one that you should see at Contact in the Desert.
And she has some amazing documentaries that she's
I'm a big fan.
Yeah,
big fan of Caroline Corey. Yeah.
All right, so I think this is in a nutshell. What do you believe the purpose for the upcoming official disclosure is?
Keep us confused. So the government's good at, right?
Right.
Government. I've already talked with two informants, namely two informants that went to the New York Times, and it's going to be really kind of a letdown. And the reason why is because you're not going to get any real information from it. What they are going to do, though, is they're going to leave the door open for investigating the possibility of extraterrestrial pilots, extraterrestrial technology. Because we do know the reality that there are patents for a lot of advanced technologies. Right. And I'm sure that a lot of that advanced technologies came from a number of places, not just Roswell, but it came from the Nazis, and it came from a number of other groups, like the Vril and others, Werner von Braun and all those. So what's going to happen is that we're going to just get the word that, it's worthy of investigation. It could be something from planet Earth, but we're not going to rule out the possibility of extraterrestrial intervention. Before, the government was basically cut and dried saying, no, there is no alien intervention, case closed, figure it out on your own. This time, though, they're going to leave the door open, and this is just going to keep everything pretty much going as planned. It's just now we got to do a lot more work in having them say, we have proof, and we have the artifacts, and we have the reason to believe they're out there.
It's kind of like when they released a lot of JFK assassination documents. It was kind of disappointing, but I don't think I think there's a lot more information they did not release. I think they did say that they didn't release a lot of information, but it was kind of disappointing.
Right, exactly. All
right, well, we appreciate you for coming on the show and being a part of Truth Be Told. And where do people find your show? If I'm sure they're already listeners, but if they're not and they want to be, how do they find you?
Well, we're on 135 stations
Is that
across
all?
the country. That's all, 175. And if you can't find us on the radio, we're on from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. You go to aftermath.fm. It's an affiliate online. There's also talkstreamlive.com from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. We also have a place where you can, it's called our digital library, our digital playground. It's at aftermath.media. It's aftermath.media. It's a subscription. And what we have is we have a library, social media, we have a chat, we have study groups with a number of your favorite investigators. You go into the part of the library where you can read up on anybody we have in there. We have documentations, we have movies, we have books, even old grimoires from way back when. We got a bunch of it in there. You pay $10 a month and you have a whole library to play with. You have a lot of people to talk to. It's a functioning online library. We call it a digital playground, but it's a functioning online library of everything we talk about on Ground Zero.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And like I said, it's an honor to have you on the show and being a part of Truth Be Told. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, being in the chat room. A lot of great conversations in there. And please subscribe to our channel. And hopefully we'll see you next week for Contact in the Desert. We're big fans, and we can't wait to see you all on Friday, the 25th through the 28th, contactinthedesert.com. Get your tickets. Until next time, I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Thanks, Clyde.
Thank you, Tony. How'd that go, Ron?
Excellent.
Good.
Good timing.
Yeah, it
So I
came
got
just the right time.
Clyde, thank you so much.